Hey there, listeners. Thanks for stopping by to the podcast today. Please, before you're done listening to this episode, leave us a review. If you're on Spotify, you can review now, and you can also review on Apple Podcasts. But if there's any platforms that I'm forgetting about and you can leave us a review, please do so. If you're happening to watch us on YouTube, and if you don't know, you can watch these podcasts on YouTube now, please like and subscribe to the channel and share the episode as well. So thanks for stopping by, everybody, and enjoy the episode.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I have a dream. Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Hello and welcome back to the Knowledge is Power podcast. I'm your host, Max Willett, and today we got another great guest on the podcast. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, my name's Aaron Guckian. I'm running for lieutenant governor, and I'm a candidate for statewide office. So November 8th is the official voting date, and I'm really grateful to be here.
Great. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to come on the podcast and talk for a little bit. So if you want to go ahead and just sort of explain your life story and how you got to where you are now, that would be a great starting point.
Yeah, well, I grew up in East Greenwich, and I'm here right now today. My parents are high school sweethearts. They grew up in Providence, Washington Park. My dad grew up on Ohio Avenue, and my father's a union plumber. My mom's a respiratory therapist. They went to Hope High School, and they just kind of instilled, getting up and going for hard work. It's just kind of American dream type stuff. And I have an older brother who's been successful in his own right. He played football at Colgate. He's down in North Carolina. I went through the public schools in East Greenwich. I'm on the Wall of Honor, played basketball, football. I was in the band. I was the band president.
Very
so
cool.
I have sort of an interesting background with that. I played the trumpet and all brass instruments. And then I went to Connecticut College. I played basketball there. I majored in music. I got certified to teach. I minored in government. And I also learned German at the language school, Deutsche Schule, in Middlebury University in Vermont in the summer. So did a couple summers there. And then I went on to the Eastman School of Music, which is, one of the most well-known conservatories in the world. I was one of 10 that was selected to sing opera on a bass. I went on to tour for a while down south in North Carolina and Italy, and I came back in my 20s because I had to get Achilles surgery due to basketball. I then taught in North Kingstown as a public music teacher, and during that summer, I started driving Don Kachiri and his wife Suzanne Kachiri, who ultimately became obviously the governor and first lady. And I was their special assistant for 2 terms. After that, I did a little spot at family court. I was special projects coordinator. And then I went on to banking. So I rose to being a vice president of bank, got an MBA at night at Johnson Wales University. So I have 2 master's degrees. And then after that, I was a vice president at Bank Newport. And I applied for a job over at the Rhode Island Foundation for fundraising. So Rhode Island Foundation is one of the oldest and largest community foundations in the country, founded in 1916, and it has $1 billion in assets, all for charitable purposes. I was one of the development team members or fundraising, and last year I raised $20 million, with very complicated estates and wire transfers and what have you. So I was really proud of my work. We did a lot of good, and I left because it's an apolitical organization and decided to run for lieutenant governor of the state of Rhode Island. I have 3 daughters. One is at Johnson of Wales. The other 2 are at middle school at Cole. And my wife's a professor at Johnson Wales for over 20 years. And she went to LaSalle High School. So she's homegrown as well.
Great. Yeah. So you guys are
Syracuse,
born and bred
went
in
to
Rhode
Syracuse
Island.
as well. Yep, born and bred.
Great. Well, that's pretty awesome. Thank you for sharing all that information. So, I'd like to get into, I was, reading your bio on your website, and a lot of cool stuff like you just mentioned, and I'd be really interested to talk about your college career, because it seems like you took a lot of different avenues while you were in college. So if you want to go into a little bit more detail about, why you decided to go to University of Connecticut and then on from there.
So I went to Connecticut College.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I have
sorry.
sort of a, yeah, that's all right, in New London, which is across from the Coast Guard Academy. Um, and I, it was just a great, great, great college. And, I studied music there. I was also, played basketball there. I had a really successful career. I scored over 1,000 points, and, I hold some records in rebounding. And we went to the NCAA tournament in my senior year. We won the NESCAC, and we're 22-4. So that was great. Also, just loved learning. It's a small school. I don't know what the teacher to faculty ratio is, but it's got to be, I don't know, 10-1, 12-1, whatever it is. So small classes. Was really able to drill down on my studies, and just had a wonderful career there. Did a lot of singing. I was in the chorus. I was lead singing. I had my own recitals over, I'm an opera singer. So, you sing in 4 different languages: English, Italian, French, German, and, some Russian and Spanish, I guess, if I was not forced to, but if that was what I had to do. So yeah, that was my college career. Was involved in a lot of different things there at Con, and I was just really fortunate to be able to attend a school of that level.
Very cool. And what made you want to get into music?
Well, I came home and I just told my parents in 4th grade that I'd like to go to take up the trumpet, and I just started playing it. And I had I was a good trumpet player. I really took it seriously. I loved it. It was really kind of gave me peace of mind as well. And East Greenwich just has such a great music program. The great Vin Matera, who's retired, was there for years, and was in the jazz band, the concert band, the chorus. I fit a lot of things in high school, with also, a sports. So, I'm just blessed. I just have some talents, and I use them, and I had the right mentors and teachers that really supported me throughout my whole life.
Very cool. It's kind of interesting because I had Caswell Cook on, and he's very
Yeah,
involved
Caswell.
with the oh my gosh, down in Westerly, the chorus in Westerly, which is very interesting to meet another person who's running for office who's also very interested in music.
Yeah, Caswell's a great guy. We've been friends a long time. I've seen him a few times on the campaign trail, and we're similar guys. We've done a lot of different things in our lives, and music is at the core. He's a successful businessman in his own right, and he's just a really helpful with the community.
Yeah, great. So, why don't we start getting into a little bit of the lieutenant governor things and sort of why you decided to run. So why don't we start off with that? Is what sort of inspired you to want to run for lieutenant governor?
Well, I have a help center. So one of my there's 2 things that usually I convey to the public in regards to this race. One, qualifications matter. The impossible happened, right? Governor Raimondo was elevated to the Biden administration, and Dan McKee, the former mayor of Cumberland and lieutenant governor, rose to governor, and he appointed a lieutenant governor. So, it's very important that whoever is lieutenant governor has the qualifications to take on that job. I mean, I know the office very well because I was a special assistant for 2 terms, and And given my background that I just discussed, I can take over if there's a crisis or, as I stated, an elevation. Second, I have a help center, and I really want to help people. I want to help people navigate through the state system. So, small business right now, if you go around, there's so many barriers to entry. There's not a lot of guidance. There's a lot of licenses and fees they get in paper, mail. So I'm suggesting one single sign-on, one username and password across all departments. Because if you're going to take people's taxes and fees, that's one thing. But if you're going to take their time, that's even worse. So constantly, when I go to the market, an older lady will ask me, I'm 6'7", hey, Aaron, can you help me get the peas off the top shelf? And I use that as an example, right? But I'm always being called and contacted saying, Aaron, can you help me? I was the chairman of the Warwick Sewer Authority. Can you help me with this sewer issue? I got a problem with Department of Business Regulation. Is there someone over Department of Health that can help me? So what might take me one phone call might take you 6 to 8 weeks or longer. And that's not okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we really need to streamline the process with a person with the qualifications. We need to cut through the red tape, as they say. In regards to long-term health care, we got a big problem with access to doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners, CNAs. There's just not enough of them right now. And we need to really work with the, Blue Cross and the other carriers to try to incentivize doctors to be here. We have the lowest reimbursement rate in the country. And it's just like my best friend, he's a surgeon. He went to Yale, he went to Vanderbilt. He decided to go to New Hampshire because he said he'd leave 20% of his career earnings due to taxes and fees and what have you. So, and reimbursement. So, we have I wouldn't say a crisis, but it's pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to really work with the long-term care community, which is under the statute of long-term with the lieutenant governor, and kind of keep working. Lastly, emergency management. When we were 6 weeks into it, in the Governor Kachiri's administration, we had the station fire. And, it was such a terrible tragedy for the state. But while I went through it, you learn, what happens in an emergency. You know how to work with the adjutant general who's in charge of the National Guard. You know who to call in the colonel's office and the locals. And it's all about communication, having meetings beforehand, trainings, and really kind of rolling up your sleeve and digging in and making sure that when the governor's doing what he or she is doing, that you're there for support. And that's the reason I got into this race. And I just feel that I'm the best candidate.
Great. So can you explain sort of the responsibilities of the lieutenant governor and what goes into the position a little bit more in detail?
Well, I just kind of talked about the three under the statute. It's small business, long-term health care. I know there's a committee for Alzheimer's, which we'll put under there, and then emergency management. So really, it's a ceremonial position, but there's so much that you can do with it. It's a $1.2 million budget. You have 7 or 8 full-time employees, and I think that rather than having policy people that are constantly working on policy will probably not get passed because there's no power there, I would suggest that you get people that are in these different departments that have background emergency management, long-term health care, small business, and have people calling in to try to help them to use that money in sort of an entrepreneurial way to really support the governor, but also get people the kind of throughput, right? Get them in the system and really work on frequently asked questions and then manage up the data. We have a lot of great legislators. I've got great relationships with the Speaker and Senate President. We might differ sometimes politically, but the bottom line is if I spoke to them about, let's just say, a certain license or fee or something and say, look, one, this should be eliminated, but two, how can we make this a little easier so they can pay it all at once? There's multiple fees if you have multiple cash registers. There's just all these small little details that are just kind of small paper cuts that are crushing our small businesses. Not necessary. I kind of bubbled this up, and then we got some legislation passed. It's a lot easier to pass that type of legislation than, let's just say, massive, big legislation and ideas that they're actually working on, and they probably wouldn't want to hear from the lieutenant governor on it. So that's sort of, there's a lot of different committees that you have to be on. You have to show up. The appointed lieutenant governor right now doesn't have the best history of convening. It's sort of, there's a lot of times where they can't get quorums. And there's a lot of missed opportunities. And that's not something that, anyone that you talk to throughout Rhode Island that knows me, they know I show up, they know I'm passionate, and they know I go the extra mile. And that's what I want to do for this state of Rhode Island and the citizens.
That's great. I'll tell you from personal experience, I have a small business, and the amount of paperwork and time you have to commit to registering your business, and then when it comes to taxes and everything like that on different platforms, having to remember different passwords and things like that, it can take up a lot of your precious time. And for every business owner, time is money. And to hear you say that, that's very great and reassuring to know that somebody who is running for office has that in their top priority.
Yeah, and I mean, after COVID, and we're in a really tough economic time. I mean, the Dow Jones is just dropping precipitously, and the Nasdaq. And I remember in 2008 and 9, everyone said, "Oh, that's a Wall Street problem," and then it becomes a Main Street problem. And then, again, you talked about it. Time. It's the fees, and also if you organized it in just one payment or maybe over quarterly. But if you go into a diner right now and you look at all the licenses that they have on the wall, it's insane, and it's antiquated, and it's old, and it's so unnecessary. You just look up, let's just say in Massachusetts, like we can just kind of copy what they're doing. And I know that very quickly we would be so successful. Small businesses are the lifeblood of Rhode Island. And, it's time that we give them that helping hand. And that's what I want to do as your next lieutenant governor.
Why do you think Rhode Island is sort of stuck in this way of old-fashioned business and how it's ran? Why do you think that they haven't adapted like other states have?
Well, I think one, and I get back to qualifications. I have an MBA. I was a business banker. I was a vice president of a bank. I worked at the Rhode Island Foundation. I was the head of the Professional Advisory Council at the Rhode Island Foundation, where it's the top estate attorneys, accountants, and financial planners, and we meet quarterly. I would meet with 100 advisors a year over my 5-year tenure. So let's call it 500, but usually, add another, probably multiple to it. Let's just say it's 1,000 because of all the events. So it's constant. Like I was with the governor, we would do 32 events in a weekend. When you're running, like these last few weekends, you just do a tremendous amount of events. And I guess the point is that people know me. I think that you need to take the information from the constituents and make sure that it's top of mind to all the legislators, but you also have to give it to them where it makes sense. They're so inundated, they're working hard, and if you're not able to, with your qualifications, whether it's legislation, whether it's just pointing out these barriers, and then also getting to a solution. I think so often politicians and people will just talk about the problem. And, one of the things you have to do when you're running for office is talk about the problems. But that's what the help center is all about. It's getting solutions. So if I can use my background and get the support of my team and make sure that, okay, here's a one pager. This is what's happening. This is what we suggest. What do you think? Now you're making it a lot easier for a decision maker like the speaker, Joe Shikarchi, to say, yes, I like this. In addition, I will be going around and meeting with business owners, convening, listening to them, getting information from them, and also trying to organize them, because you're so busy as a small business owner. But if I can start getting, say, 5 to 10 people in all of our 39 cities and towns, call it 40 to make it simple, you're talking about, you multiply it by 10, right? Maybe 400 business owners. Start there. Then they can call their legislators and they can say, look, this is a problem, put a little pressure on them. And then I can use my office to advocate. And then I think that we'll get a lot of legislation to eliminate a lot of these barriers and small issues that are becoming major impediments for progress for our small business community.
Great. So would you say that small business is your top priority as lieutenant governor, or would you say that there are other issues that, concern you equally?
Well, small business is one of them, and it's one of my, it's my background. I think with emergency management, which is also obviously the top priority if you're not secure and safe. My opponent is defund police, so I'm very much advocating that we need to refund police and have their back, especially when they have to make a decision, at a moment's notice. But in emergency management, obviously we have the hurricane that hit Florida, and my prayers go out to the Floridians, and in addition to the Rhode Islanders that have a lot of property down there and that might have been down there. But, we need to plan. We need to make sure that everyone's organized. And, when a crisis occurs, the governor steps in usually and can work in tandem with the lieutenant governor. But the point is that you have the background and the experience. You just can't rush experience. We have an appointed lieutenant governor, just doesn't have that background. And that doesn't mean, she's got a great personal story, but, she has a very small resume. She was the president of the city council in Providence, and Providence is not doing well. So another part.
Hey there, sorry to interrupt, but if you're looking for a great way to grow your business and to market it, this podcast is a perfect spot for it. With plans starting at $20 a month, so it's not a large upfront cost, it's affordable and an easy way to get to promote your business to other local Rhode Islanders or even people all across the country. So if you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, this is called a mid-roll, and it'll just be like your sponsorship, and it'll be around 1 minute. So if you're interested, please contact us at kip-pod.com for all of our contact information. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Part would be emergency management, and then long-term healthcare. Like, I don't have the background in healthcare, but I do. I am able to bring a lot of people together and listen. And again, because of my contacts throughout the state, you get some information and work on one by one, right? And I've learned if you can solve small problems, it becomes a big, solution in the years to come.
So something that I've heard about our current governor, Dan McKee, when he was lieutenant governor, there was a lot of separation between him and Gina Raimondo. There wasn't a lot of communication.
Yes.
So do you think that the key to being a good lieutenant governor is communication between the governor of Rhode Island and lieutenant governor? And would you plan on communicating a lot with whoever is governor if you get elected?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm supporting Ashley Kalis, who's at the top of the ticket, and Alan Fung, who's running in CD2, Congressional District 2, excuse me. I've known Governor McKee for a long time, over 20 years. Met him in Kachiri's office, Governor Kachiri's office, and the administration. And so, I would work with either individual to the best of my ability. Obviously, that would be up to the governor. And, it just all depends on, if they're willing. Governor McKee will be, I think, 71. Maybe 72. I know he's in his early 70s. So I would be surprised if he was going to run again. So that would probably make him more likely to work with me. I think that there's just so much the governor has to do. He's has great relationships with mayors, so I think that he would work with me. And then with Ashley, I've been working with her on the campaign, and she's a mom of three, and just has a great business background. Grew a practice out in Chicago with her husband, who's just such a talented plastic surgeon, and they've done very well. And I've recently met her, during this campaign, and she's just so talented. So most people will say I'm pretty easy to get along with. I mean, so I would do the best I can to support them, but also, hopefully whatever their boundary is, respect that. But I think it's not a good thing if the governor and lieutenant governor don't talk, or don't help each other.
Great. And another question I have for you is, we're sort of tying back into your background and your life story a little bit. Is there anybody that you look up to, like from a political standpoint?
Well, in regards to nationally, Governor Sununu, Governor Baker up in Massachusetts, they're just, the middle of the road kind of old kind of Republicans, right? In New England, those New England Republicans. President Eisenhower and President Reagan are probably people that I've read about, and obviously Ronald Reagan was the president when I was younger, but I really love sort of their down the middle work across the aisle. And my father's a local 51. President Eisenhower had a great track record with unions. I have a lot of connections with the trade unions, and George Nee of the AFL-CIO. In regards to looking up to people now, I mean, Governor Kachiri obviously was a mentor. Other mentors that might not be politically is Neil Steinberg, the CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation, just such a talented man, did so much for the state. I know he's retiring in May, and really took that foundation from, I think it was $500 million already to $1 billion in 20 years. So he's just, or less than, excuse me, about 13 to 15 years, however long. I think it was 2008. So call it 14. Joe Mackerel, who was former chairman and CEO of the Washington Trust Company, and Ned Handy, just great mentors over there. I've had a lot of interactions with Joe, and he's always been a steady hand. And that mentorship is something I want to bring to the Help Center. I think that having small business owners that are just starting out and connecting them with more seasoned business owners that might have done startups in the past, and really trying to help that community. I mean, it's Startup Week, so I'm just going to be going to some events to support that, because we really need sort of these startups and innovation to really move our state forward.
Great. Yeah. So an issue that I had Ashley Kalis on the podcast, and she is very much into supporting teachers and focusing on education in the state of Rhode Island. Is there anything that the lieutenant governor can do to assist with that, with those issues that are in the state in terms of education and teachers?
Well, I have background in education. I'm a certified public music teacher. I taught 2 years in North Kingstown. That's what I got. I had a double major at Connecticut College. I got certified, which is a nationally well-known education program. So it's in my wheelhouse. I was on the charter school, Blackstone Academy in Pawtucket for 5 years, so I have that background. But I was in public schools. I think that they need people, again, with qualifications. I have an MBA. I was a public music teacher. So there's a lot that I can bring to the table in regards to helping or supporting the governor if they're open to it, because he can't be everywhere. And so, yes, I'm open to it. It's one of my lanes. In my life, there's probably 4 or 5 lanes that I feel really comfortable with, and that I feel that I'm an expert or in that area. I don't feel I'm an expert in education, but I do feel I have a good background that I could help, try to move this forward, and really, try to get to the basics of, math and reading. And it's just, I think that right now the teachers are, special education teachers specifically, are inundated with paperwork. I think they need like almost like a chief processing officer at each city and town, because we need teachers to be in the classroom teaching, not necessarily doing all this paperwork. It's almost like they need to be lawyers as well. And I don't think that's fair. So that's one of the things I'd probably advocate, or I will advocate, I should say, not probably, will advocate as the next lieutenant governor. But I'm going to have my three under statutory, what we've talked about, the sectors that, I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves when elected. But yes, education is something that we really, especially in Providence, they're really, really failing right now. And, my opponent was the city council president when all of that was coming out. So, if you don't have background in these certain areas, you're not as helpful. That's the way it is. And the appointed lieutenant governor just doesn't have much of a resume. So that's what I've been highlighting throughout my campaign is qualifications matter, and my help center.
Great. Well, I have a question for you. I mean, you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to, but about Ashley Kayla. So you mentioned how, you always say qualifications matter, and Ashley has little to no political background or has really been around it. So what do you think makes her a great gubernatorial candidate in your eyes?
Well, she did work for the governor of Illinois.
Okay.
So she was in his administration. You'd have to talk further about exactly what she did, but I do know that. We in Rhode Island, just to be this, we're not on the same ticket. So, I run my campaign, she runs her campaign. We try to support each other. But if you look at her background, I don't have her resume in front of me, but she went to Columbia, London School of Economics. She took a practice with her husband and brought it from just a sort of a startup to a massive organization. She did a lot of work with COVID. Healthcare is really her lane, and finance. And when I've been in her company, which is a lot, we have some really high level conversations about the economy and finance. I know that the blue economy is something that's very important to her. It's important to me. Innovation again. I think right now in regards to energy, I believe that we're not there yet. And I think it's been forced, and we're dealing with sort of the blowback, unfortunately. So it's in regards to her background in education, you have to speak to her about her platform and what she wants to do. But as an overall candidate, she's a mom of three. She's 40 years old, and she's all in for this state. I know I'm all in. But if you want to ask her more questions about her background, I would just suggest you talk to her campaigner or to Ashley specifically, directly.
Yeah, no, I was just curious to hear what you had to say. I had a great conversation with her on the podcast, and she was a great guest to have.
Yeah, I support her, and Mayor Funk.
Great. Well,
I say triple A helps on the way, right?
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yep. Let's get out of the ditch, right? Get the tow truck going.
Start making t-shirts of that. I think you guys could sell a lot of t-shirts, especially even to some people that wouldn't even know what's going on. You just say, "Oh, we're advocating for AAA."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Got to talk to the lawyers, though, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that might cause a couple issues.
Yeah.
But so I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. We've had a great conversation, and something I ask at the end of every podcast is, what sort of advice would you share to my listeners, whether it's business, politics, life advice, whatever you want it to be? What do you want to leave for advice?
Well, one of my mottos is get up and grind. And I think we've lost that. I think that especially the younger generation, I'm 46 years old. I think that obviously through COVID and their access to a lot of these devices, it's sometimes, when I was a special assistant to the governor, I was 25. Sometimes, you're taking the garbage out. Other times, and I'm being a little bit extreme, but it's true. And other times you might be the liaison to the the vice president, and you're working with the vice president's team to get him in, which I did when he came to Rhode Island and Newport. I guess the point is that you got to get up early, you got to get up and grind, you got to follow directions. Something I've really had to work on throughout my life. When I was a young kid, they always said, doesn't follow directions. So I got to really concentrate because there was a gentleman named Jim Sansi who was the head of development at the Rhode Island Foundation, and I really just followed his directions, and I really trusted him as a leader. And he had been there. We're the same age, we have 3 kids and everything of that nature, but I became a very good employee. And I think it's important that we all have goals. We all want to get there quick. When I was in my 20s, I was really always trying to look at the people that got to, let's say, the top the fastest. But there's consequences to that as well. And I think that you really need to just sort of get up, follow directions, do the best you can to the best of your ability. And when that happens, things usually work out. I find that sometimes younger people right now have their own ideas, and I'm not stifling creativity. But if you're, let's just say, talking to me about, I don't know, politics, I've been in it a long time. So I know more than probably and that's okay. So if I can just give you some advice and you can just take that and just follow some directions rather than always saying, I call it the yeah, but, well, why don't we try it this way? Or why don't we do it that way? Or, you know what? That's not under my purview, because let me take out, that's not the way life is. Obviously you have to have boundaries for everything. But the bottom line is, I think that there needs to be that hustle, and that, and I'm not seeing that as much. And it's important because if we're not hustling, we're not moving, and then we're lazy, and then, things don't get done. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, what I always try to convey to people is get up, work hard, and things usually will take care of themselves. But you got to be motivated, and you got to follow some directions. I know I did, but it took me some while, and that's why I had great mentors. When I always call it guardrails, rather than micromanaging, it's, hey, this isn't working out, you need to get back this way. And I found that to be successful for me, especially in my management style. When I was the vice president, chairman of the Warwick Sewer Authority, I don't micromanage, but I do sort of on the top say, all right, you made a mistake here. How can we change it? And how can we do it differently? And, that's sort of what I bring to the table for Lieutenant Governor.
Great. And actually, before we end, I actually wanted to ask you just one more question about your time with Governor Kucheri, and sort of how
Yes.
you fell into that seat, because that's really interesting to hear, and sort of how you got into that position.
Well, I started volunteering with him in the summer. It was in between. I was a music teacher. Someone passed away in North Kingstown for 6 months. And then I went and just, I was kind of bored. I was in my mid-20s, and I said I always wanted to get on a campaign. And he's a local East Greenwich resident. I know his family. I went to Our Lady of Mercy. I sang at his son-in-law and youngest daughter's wedding, so I knew them. And then he asked me to be his driver. And I did a lot more than driving. I supported him, during the day-to-day. We did a lot of coordination and that type of thing. And, I would teach from 8 to 3, whatever it was, in North Kingstown. I would then pick him up, drive him from 3:30 to 11 at night. Then I would wake up on Saturday, drive him from 7 in the morning to 10 at night. And I do that Saturday and Sunday. And sometimes we do 32 events in the weekend. So again, it's that get up and grind, right? So I worked really hard. I never thought, I don't think, Don was an outside chance. He wasn't even the endorsed Republican. He won the primary, and then he beat Murph York. And I just remember being in this car when President Bush called to congratulate him that night, which was really exciting. And that's when kind of everything kind of changed. But just a tremendous man. I really miss Mrs. Kucheri, who I worked with as well. I worked with the family. I just did I had so many different duties. And there's highs and lows to any administration. And when it was low, I always supported them and just just said, okay, what are we going to do, or how can I help? And then when the highs, everyone's there, right? When you win or something successful is passed. So it's an up and down job. But I'm really grateful that I have this opportunity. And I think that anyone that runs should be commended, because this is a really tough process.
Yeah, well, I
But I
really
just love
appreciate.
my
Oh,
8 years there. I learned
yeah,
so much. I met so many different people. I helped a lot of people. I received a lot of help. And I just have a lot of I'm just grateful.
great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to talk to me and share your life story and advice for all my listeners. So thank you.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. And last thing is, like, empathy um and compassion, I think, is also important. There's a nice, hopefully, if you're in management, where you're constantly trying to bring that person up to speed, and sometimes you've got to be a little hard hitting, but then also you've got to also try to give that hand up and try to help them and say, this is going to be okay, and we got to keep moving forward. So thank you so much for having me. Aaron Guckian for Lieutenant Governor on November 8th. Please vote for me. Aaron Guckian, Lieutenant Governor, and my website is Guckian, Guckian, forLtgov.com. So I just hope you have a great day, and thanks again for this opportunity.
no problem. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the podcast, and I will catch you in the next one.
Whoa, hey, were you just going to click off this episode? Well, don't. Not quite just yet. I wanted to tell you about the Knowledge is Power Instagram. If you want to follow the podcast other than just through the podcast episodes, follow Knowledge is Power on Instagram. Also, if you're looking for a sponsorship, this is called an end roll. And this will be just like your sponsorship if you decide to market your business through this podcast. It's a great way to reach local people in the state of Rhode Island or people all across the country, as we have listeners nationwide. So if you're interested in getting a sponsorship just like this at the end of an episode, feel free to contact us at kip-pod.com to find all of our contact information. Thanks, guys, for listening, and make sure to listen to the other episodes on Knowledge is Power.